Alright guys, M-Tech Guy here, and today we need to get an oil change done on this E30. Now this is a 318 IS, it's got the M42 engine, the twin cam 16 valve. So out of all the engines that were put in these E30s, this was the most technically advanced engine of them all, even over the E30 M3. So how often should you change the oil in one of these engines? Well, the owner's manual is pretty vague on this. This was when they were going into that condition-based monitoring system. So by rights, you're supposed to just follow what's on the dash, you know, the countdown lights, and when it comes up with that oil service indicator. Now these cars are getting old, and 90% of them out there on the road, that service indicator either doesn't work or it half works or the lights don't quite work. There's usually something weird going on with it, and it's usually 90% of the time not working 100%. And nonetheless, you might want to change your oil more frequently anyway. So I would recommend it's probably every 5,000 miles or 1 year, whichever comes first, if you're using a fully synthetic oil. Now when these engines were built, they were built to run on semi-synthetic. There wasn't really a great deal of fully synthetics available out there at the time. So if you're on a tight budget, you can run these engines on a semi-synthetic. It's not a big deal, but I probably would look at changing the oil more frequently if that was the case. They do have the potential to start sludging ever so slightly more than a fully synthetic. So if you're using semi, I'll probably go 3,000 miles or every 6 months. But that's just me. Probably being overcautious, and you can never be too overcautious when you want to look after an engine with your oil changes, but it's your car, it's up to you. So I was in two minds whether to try a semi-synthetic or a fully synthetic with this car. I think I'm going to go fully synthetic, purely based on the fact that it's got a much higher shear strength than semi-synthetic, so it's going to last that bit longer. It's not going to break down as quickly or as easily, and it's going to protect all the bearings inside the engine. So with regards to oil viscosity, if you read the owner's manual for these cars, what it recommends is a relatively thick oil in comparison to most modern cars. You're talking 1050, 1550, depending on what your climate's like, what your ambient temperature's like, where you live. That does seem quite thick. You can probably get away with a thinner oil if you're using a synthetic, because it's going to hold up much better than them old semi-synthetics. So I was in two minds what to use with this car, whether I was going to use semi-synthetic, fully synthetic. I decided to go a fully synthetic. I originally went for a 1040, thinking it would give me that little bit of a heavier weight, but when I changed the oil, what I found was I was getting heaps of lifter tick. Previously, it had a 540. So when everything was warmed up, the engine was running beautifully, but from a cold start, I was getting a lot of tappity noise, a lot of lifter tick, and it was hanging around for about the first 10 minutes of driving before the engine had warmed up. I didn't really like that, and it wasn't just a bit of tappet noise. The engine sounded like a flipping machine gun, so I wasn't happy with that. So today we're going to try something a little bit different. So let's see what oil I've got for the car, and let's get into it. Right, so I've gone for the Penrite branded oil. This is a pretty good quality oil. It's an Australian brand. It's actually proudly Australian. You can see on the bottle there. So this is a 540 fully synthetic. It's ACEA A3/B4 specification, which is what you want to be looking for. So you need 4.5 litres to carry out the oil change on the E30 with the M42 engine. I've gone for 6 litres here, so that's more than enough. I'll have a little bit left over for a top up later on should I need it. And also whenever I'm carrying out an oil change, once I've drained the old oil, what I like to do is just pour a small amount of the new oil right the way through the engine while the drain plugs out, just to give it a little bit of a flush, to flush that last bit of the old oil out of there. I've gone for a Meili branded oil filter. This is the OX91D. I believe this brand was the OEM manufacturer. I'm not 100% sure on that, but this does come with all the O-rings and the crush washer that you need to get the job done. All right, let's get into it. All right, so I've got the front end of the car raised up so we can gain access to the drain plug underneath. So I jacked it up and I've just sat the front wheels on some wooden blocks there. And I've got chocks on the rear wheels, handbrakes on now. So now we can get underneath and drain the old oil. Right, so first off, we'll just release the cap on the oil filter housing, and then that's going to let all the oil out of the oil filter housing drain back into the sump. This takes a 13mm socket. Now we can release the sump plug. It takes a 17mm socket. Okay, now Fucking hell, man. The fuck? Fuck, who did this fucker up? Alright, I don't know who's done this up last, but it's been done up to about 1,000,000 foot-pounds, so I'm gonna have to try with the breaker bar to break this free. There we go. I never understand why people feel the need to do these drain plugs up so tight, because all you're doing is just compressing that little aluminium or copper washer behind there to seal it. It's not holding any force, it's not going to come apart, it's not holding anything together. All it does is just cause problems, because especially with an aluminium sump like this, you risk just destroying them threads if you're not careful. So I'll let that drain out. Look at how compressed that washer is. That's ridiculous. I've never seen one so flat and deformed. Insane. Alright, so while the engine oil's draining off, what we can do now is just remove this filter. And it does get a bit messy, this, so you might want a rag on hand just to catch any dribbles. And once that oil's finished draining, what I normally like to do before I go any further is just pour a bit of fresh oil right the way through the engine, just so it gives that a bit of a flush, just to get that last little bit of old dirty oil out of there. There we go, doesn't need much. Okay, so while that last bit of oil continues to drain, we can now get the new oil filter sorted. So first up, we'll change this O-ring in the cap, but before we go too far, see there's a bit of dirt that's accumulated around the edge there, so just going to clean that off with some brake clean and a clean rag, because we don't want any of that getting into the oil filter housing. There we go, so I've given that a wipe down, so that's nice and clean now. I'm going to use a pick tool to remove the old O-ring. And then make sure that groove's nice and clean before we locate the new O-ring in there. Right, so that's that sorted. Also got this copper washer to remove off the top here. Next up, we've got another O-ring right on the end of the bolt. So we'll get rid of that one. We'll install the brand new one. And we've got a new aluminium washer to go under the head of the bolt, at the top there. And of course our new copper sump plug washer. Right, so that oil should have stopped draining now. So we can go and reinstall the sump plug. We're certainly not going to match the torque that the previous guy put it in at. So all we're doing is compressing that copper washer, we don't need to go mad. There we go. Looks like these power steering leaks, the leaky hoses have made quite the mess down here. Another job on the list. Now we're ready to install the new oil filter, so we'll just prepare these parts ready. So what we'll do is just take some fresh engine oil. We're just going to lube up this O-ring, just so it doesn't bunch up and it slides nicely as we're tightening the cap down. Same with the one on the end of the bolt there. Reinstall a bolt on the cap and just make sure that aluminium washer's in position under the head of the bolt. So now we can fit our brand new oil filter, fit the cap. And we can tighten that cap bolt. And again, we don't need to go crazy tightening up, just compressing them seals. There we go. This pours a lot nicer than the 10W60 normally used in the M5. All the stuff's like treacle. Right, so that's about 4 litres in there now. So what I'll do now is drop it back down on its front wheels so the car's sitting nice and level. Then we'll crank it over just to fill the oil filter housing, let the oil circulate, and then we'll turn it off, check the level. Right, before we get too carried away, we'll just check the oil level on the dipstick before we fire her up. So looking at that, so just over the low line there, so got about 3/4 to put in there. So I might just top that up now before I crank it over because it's going to lose a litre filling up the oil filter housing. I'll just check that level again. So yeah, we're just about at the full line now, so that's close enough. So I'll crank it over, we'll let it run just for a few seconds, and then we'll check the level again before we top it up. So we'll crank her over, but the one thing you want to watch out for is you want to make sure the oil pressure light goes out pretty quick. There we go, it's gone out straight away, which is good. So we flash there. There we go, it's pretty happy. So we'll just let that circulate for a couple of seconds and we'll shut it off just to let it fill up that oil filter housing. Should do. Recheck the oil level, so that's reduced. So I'll just top that up to the fill line, so we're on about 3/4 of a litre, and we should be just about done then. That's all topped up now, so I'll just give that another check. There we are, perfect. It's just on the fill line there. Right, so what we'll do is reset the inspection service light because that's what's up on the dashboard. Alright guys, so there we have it. That's the oil change sorted on the E30 318 IS with the M42 engine. So it's been going good with the 540 weight. It certainly helped out with that tappity noise. It sounds so much better, so much smoother, starting up from cold now. So I've found that 540 and a fully synthetic seems to be a nice balance in these cars with this engine. The climate here in New Zealand in wintertime, it very rarely gets down to about 0. Anything below 0 might get down to -5, worst case scenario here on the South Island. Summertime we might get up to around about 36, something like that. So I'm finding that weight in a fully synthetic just seems to be about right, just a nice balance for this engine for where I live. Rightio, if you found the video interesting or useful, don't forget to give it a like and make sure you go and check out the rest of my YouTube channel for more BMW E30 content. Consider subscribing if that's your cup of tea. I'm MTech Guy. Thanks a lot for watching.